Yo, what's going on, everybody? Per usual, I hope everyone's having a blessed day. So, in today's video, I will further explain why evolution, or the Darwinian mechanism for the origin of species, is a myth. We can just call this Evolution is a Myth, Part 2. So, back in November of 2016, leading scientists and philosophers gathered at the Royal Society for a meeting titled New Trends in Evolutionary Biology. Biological, philosophical, and social science perspectives. They gathered to discuss new evolutionary theories as the Darwinian mechanism, natural selection, random variants, and mutations was no longer a viable theory for majority of the scientific community. There were still defendants of neo-Darwinism, but they, like the theory, could not answer the question that attendee Dr. Gerd B. Mueller, an Australian biologist and head of the Department of Theoretical Biology and the Center for Organismal Systems Biology proposes. He states in an article titled Why an Extended Evolutionary Synthesis is Necessary that current evolutionary theory largely avoids the question of how complex organizations of organismal structure, physiology, development, or behavior whose variation it describes actually arise in evolution. Now, I wanted to add that I may have misrepresented evolutionists in my last video, as there are other theories of evolution circulating besides neo-Darwinism and punctuated equilibrium from a naturalist standpoint, but none of those theories can explain where the origin of information that posits DNA comes from. There is a theory, though, that explains the origin of information, which is given by Dr. Stephen C. Meyer, who got his PhD in the philosophy of science from the University of Cambridge, and currently is the director of Discovery Institute's Center for Science and Culture in Seattle. Dr. Meyer was also an attendee of the Royal Science meeting. He points to intelligent design as the origin of information/species after careful observation and study of DNA and the fossil record. So, what is DNA? DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is the hereditary material for almost all living organisms. In 1953, the double helix model for DNA was discovered by James Watson and Francis Crick. They discovered not only the structure of DNA, but how DNA bonded together, DNA's ability to copy itself, and carry genetic information. Then in 1957, Crick proposes the sequence hypothesis, where DNA functions like an alphabet in a written language or digital characters in a machine code. The importance of this revelation infers that the key component of protein synthesis is in the sequential code embedded in DNA, not the structure or properties of DNA itself. Now, here's just an interesting fact about DNA. But if you're actually to uncoil DNA from a single cell, it would be about 2 meters long. Then, if you were to add up all the DNA from every single cell in your body, it would be twice the diameter of the solar system. Just try to rack your brain around that for a sec. But anyways, after further research into cells and DNA, scientists have discovered that DNA only codes for proteins, and that the information to enact gene expression, to form the cell, to create tissue, and to actually create the body plan or structure of the organism comes from epigenetic or above genetic information. In other words, body plan information does not come from DNA. You need other sources of information to create a body plan. This means you can manipulate DNA till the end of time and it will not create a new body plan or a new species. This was proven in Robert Lenski's 20 years of experiments on manipulating the DNA of over 60,000 E. coli generations, which primarily led to a degradation of functionality and one instance of improving an already existing function with no novel information being created. He started with E. coli, mostly ended with lesser versions of E. coli, or just ended with E. coli. With this knowledge, Darwinian evolution is impossible. Mutations typically lead to a degradation of already existing information. And even with our intelligent minds, we cannot mutate pre-existing species to create new species, bypass genetic limits, or just create any novel information. So then, how can we ascribe to the notion that nature was able to do this alone? Also, to reiterate, the Darwinian theory does not answer the question of where this information comes from to allow the vast amount of species to exist. Richard Dawkins, a famous atheist biologist, even claims that biology looks intelligently designed, but he has to remind himself that it's not. Don't be closed-minded like a Richard Dawkins and brainwash yourself. If you're going to follow science, then follow it where it leads and don't try to bend it to fit your reality. Bill Gates has even been quoted to say that DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created. So like computer software, if there's a code, then there must be a coder. And since DNA's 3 billion parts is this sophisticated, then the only logical conclusion that we can draw is that it comes from an intelligent designer. Amen.